Hello everyone, sorry about that. I went to go turn off the alarm and unfortunately the connection to the Facebook Live went out. So I'm so sorry. I wish I would have known everybody who was on I can click back on. But we're gonna go ahead and start back, and I do apologize.
Making money or being independent, but it also supports these other activities, being able to make education possible for children.
Constantine Winfrey wasn't the only ancestor we found trying to keep the dream of education alive. While exploring her family history in the book Balm in Gilead, my Harvard colleague Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot discovered that her family members had also been involved in the fight for African American education.
This is my grandfather, Charles Lawrence Sr., and my grandmother, Letitia Burnett Harris.
Now, your grandparents settled in Boston after they were married.
They got married and then decided to move to Utica Institute, which was this small, poor place in the South.
And here they are at Utica.
Oh my goodness.
Here they are as teachers on the faculty of the Utica Normal and Industrial Institute in Mississippi.
Too exciting.
When they were returning to the South,
Yes.
It's a wonder they weren't trampled to death by all the black people who were fleeing the South,
Exactly.
trying to get to the North. Why in the world would they be motivated to go back?
All I can imagine, and all I know from talking to my parents about it, my father, is that they thought their work was there, and the most important civil rights work was there, which was education, and the places where they were needed the most was there.
The Utica Normal and Industrial Institute, where Sarah's grandparents taught, was based on the philosophy of the famous black educator, Booker T. Washington.
These students, both males and females, were there to learn a trade. It was a trade school. They had machine shop. They were taught, how to care for hogs. And every year there was a big contest on who had the biggest pig and how they cared for that pig. The girls were taught how to sew. They were taught how to cook. They were taught how to do the practical things that would enable them to work in someone's home. This was an extension of Booker T. Washington's philosophy that you put down your buckets where you are and you make life good right where you are using the skills that you have. Many of the students were from the rural areas, and they used the bartering system to go to school. They would give cows, they would just send chickens, whatever, in turn for their children to be educated.
Sarah knows some details about her grandfather's involvement at Utica, but we found even more. Sarah, this is a page from the Utica yearbook. Now, would you be kind enough
Oh my goodness.
to read that text aloud?
Major Charles Radford Lawrence, Treasurer, Commandant, Professor of Tailoring, Director of the Department of Music. He is known as the man with 1,000 jobs.
The man with 1,000 jobs. Isn't that great?
It is. When I hear the stories my grandfather told of who the students were at Utica Institute, they were poor, rural people. And I say people because they were from very young ages to very old ages, most of them working in the fields.
Mm-hmm.
And what
My daddy said they were poor. They couldn't even afford the O and the R.
Exactly. That they had the opportunity to learn how to read and write and figure, that they had the opportunity to learn trades and participate in a meaningful way in society. It seems to me an important part of our history.
This story reminds me of how African Americans had to fight for even the most basic rights. And it makes me even more curious about how my great-great-grandmother achieved everything that she did. So I keep bugging my father to tell me more about her and about our connection to the Bradys.
Right
Daddy?
Yes.
Did you know any Brady's?
Any what?
Any Brady's? When you were growing up?
Oh, several of them.
You did?
Yes.
Which ones?
Well, I knew Mary Brady. Make her right here.
Okay. And did you ever talk to her about being related to her?
Oh, yeah.
And she said you were related?
She thought, yep, before she knew who was. Actually, I tended the bar. She had a party, and I tended the bar for her.
You were the bartender?
Yeah.
She didn't walk up to you and say, "You're my cousin," right?
We just talked.
Meanwhile, Jane Ailes has kept looking too. And she's found something very surprising. Some manumission papers, documents setting free a number of slaves named Gates in this area, back in the early 1800s.
I found a Jack Gates, who was freed by a woman by the name of Mrs. Sarah Prather. She signed a document in 1820 to free him.
Negro Jack, who calls himself Jack Gates. Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Jack Gates. I'm liking this. Where does this go?
Well, this is the will of Sarah Prather, and she lists her slaves. She says, "I will and direct that my female slave Susanna, a woman of color, be free and discharged from the service of my heirs, from and in the first day of May, that will be in the year of our Lord, 1831.
Okay, Susanna's free in 1831.
Okay. And that her child be free and discharged from the service of my heirs, and each and all of them, save only one female child called Jane.
Called Jane. So you think this is Jane Gates because of the Jack Gates?
Well, her son released a man by the name of Benjamin Gates, and Sarah Prather released a man by the name of Jack Gates.
And so if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, this is the duck.
Well, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Okay. It does tell us here where Jane went.
Okay, where'd she go?
Susanna's female child called Jane, hereinafter bequeathed to my granddaughter Elizabeth Riley to serve until 28 years of age.
So this would mean that if this is Jane Gates, our Jane Gates, you will have found a whole nother generation. Jane Gates' mother.
And we know her name.
And her name. Her name is Susanna. And we know from our obituary that Jane was born in 1819. So this would be Jane.
Yes. It could be. It could very well be her.
Imagine that. I set out in search of my white great-great-grandfather, but I may have found my black great-great-great-grandmother instead, a woman named Susanna. First thing is, they found Jane Gates' mother, and her name was Susanna, and it was a white family named Prather. You ever hear of the Prathers? Prather.
Never heard of her.
Right.
And the will said that when Jane was 28, they would free her. They freed all the other children when they became 24. Jane must have done something to upset somebody. I wonder what she did. I have no idea. But they wouldn't cut her loose till she was 28. This turns everything upside down. Maybe the father of Jane's children was a Prather and not a Brady. In the end, there was only one way to resolve the mystery of Samuel Brady: through science and DNA. So I've taken a DNA sample and sent it to the geneticist, Dr. Rick Kittles, who is analyzing my Y chromosome, a segment of my DNA that is passed down unchanged along my father's line. If Brady did father Jane's children, I will share his DNA.
The oral history was that Skip had this European paternal ancestor, and so the Y chromosome test would be the perfect test for that. However, you do need to have a male descendant of this, we call him the patriarch of the family.
To find that descendant, we placed an ad in the Cumberland newspaper. When no one responded, Jane Ailes suggested that we track down two of her distant cousins who were direct male descendants of Samuel Brady's father. John Brady, who lives in Maryland, and Bill Brady, who lives in California. Both of them agreed to send Dr. Kittles samples of their DNA. Now you know, and I want to find out. Who's my daddy?
We looked at 24 markers on your Y chromosome, pieces of DNA on your Y chromosome that vary. And we compared that to the Y chromosome of John Brady. We found that 4 of those markers did not match.
Is that good or bad?
That was bad.
That's bad.
So then we said, okay, well, let's retest. And so, in fact, we increased the number of markers from 24 to 37. In addition to that, we also tested Bill Brady. The 2 Bradys, John and Bill, were identical. Yours differed between the 2 of those by 7. It suggests that you do not share any recent common ancestors.
I'm not the same as Brady.
Right.
Some other white man.
Some other white man.
I have to confess that I am disappointed. So it's just a story. And we still don't know how Jane Gates was able to purchase her home. Fortunately, we're having better luck finding out about Whoopi's ancestors. Whoopi, this affidavit dated 1878 proves that your ancestors, William and Elsa Washington, became the legal owners of their land.
This is quite amazing.
What they did was extraordinary in African American history. They were property owners.
Yes, they were.
You know how few black people were property owners at that time?
Wow.
Now, we all know about 40 acres and the mule.
Right.
And it would have been so different if
Right.
our ancestors actually could have gotten some land. But, of course, we never got the 40 acres. So,
We did.
Exactly. A very few resourceful, clever, entrepreneurial slaves, like your great-great-grandparents, became homesteaders as a way to acquire property without capital.
I always knew somewhere in my gut that we had arrived early on. But this sort of, cements that and makes it even bigger in me. That this is mine. This is mine. Let somebody tell me to go back to where I came from now.
It's true. Whoopi's ancestors weren't the only ones to triumph over adversity. Even though educational opportunities were scarce in the years that followed Reconstruction, Oprah's ancestor Constantine kept the dream of education alive, not only for his community, but also for his children, including his son, Sanford. Well, like many of your ancestors, Sanford, your great-grandfather, was a farmer, but Oprah, he was also a teacher. Now, most towns in rural Mississippi had a one-room schoolhouse for the colored children. So Sanford, your great-grandfather, was the head teacher. He taught all subjects to all ages of the colored kids, and he was so intelligent that people called him the professor. So, I mean, we have a leitmotif running here. Education, education, education. Education is ingrained in your genes, girl.
I feel so deeply, in a way that I cannot even articulate through words, that education is freedom. Like, it's the open door.
It is.
I think it's deep. That is where I come from. I've always understood on the periphery how important it is, and also inside myself, but I didn't know that it came from that was the root of where I came from.
Yeah, you're at the tail end of a long line of people who loved education. The Winfrey family is a remarkable example of how some African Americans built lives for themselves in spite of everything. But what if you were alone, like Ben Carson's great-grandfather, John H. Copeland? When he was freed, he was only 9 years old. Would he be reunited with his family?
Many times I wondered, what it was like, to be enslaved, and what incredible strength it must have taken to endure that.
After freedom came, many African Americans looked for family members who had been sold away. People placed ads in newspapers or read notices in black churches. Others wrote letters to the Freedmen's Bureau, hoping to find their lost loved ones.
Dear Sister Jane, your little brother Hawkins is trying to find out where you are and where his poor old mother is. Let me know, and I will come to see you. Your advice to me, to meet you in heaven, has never passed from my mind, and I have endeavored to live as near to my God, that if he saw fit not to suffer us to meet on earth, we might indeed meet in heaven.
We have no way of knowing how many people found each other again. But we did find one piece of evidence about Ben Carson's great-grandfather. This is a page of the 1870 census. The Civil War has been over 5 years, and we found John. But John, Ben, is back in Harris County. He's 12 years old, and he's living with a 74-year-old man, Spencer, a woman named Patience, and a younger female named Dicey. He had been dispersed to that other county, and then 5 years after the Civil War, he had managed to get back.
My gosh, unbelievable.
One of the things that any historian of the black experience will tell you is that this is a very rare story. Usually families dispersed in the way that yours was in 1859 never see each other.
Right.
But incredibly, your ancestor managed to get back.
They had tenacity.
They had tenacity.
Maybe that's where my mother got it from.
It was one hard-headed little boy. That's a good story. Exploring the stories of our ancestors has given me fresh perspectives on the early years of freedom. But it sure left me with questions about my own ancestor, Jane. I still have to tell my family about the results of that DNA test. So, Johnny, I had a DNA test done. All right?
Very good.
So you ready for the result?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm pretty confident in the result.
Okay. We have no relationship to the Brady's.
All these years we've been related to the Brady's. And took a test to prove that we're not related. Oh, well.
So what do you think? You think the test is right?
No.
Out of 37 markers, we had 30 in common, which sounds alike. It's like nothing. It means that you're from maybe remotely the same broad region in Europe. That was it. We're not even cousins of the Brady's. Now the science doesn't lie. Now how do you feel about that, my brother?
Well, I don't know about the test of science, but I know what my grandfather said and what your father said and what my uncle said. That was always the history. Now it's passed down to me. And when my sons ask me, origin and all the research I've done, I still tell the Brady story.
Even with the DNA, even if I send you the DNA results, are you still going to tell the Brady story?
It'll be one of the stories, yeah. I mean, the DNA is one story and the Brady story is the other.
Our people have been hard-headed for 150 years, and you have inherited the hard-headedness.
Yes.
Wow.
Believe me, I didn't set out to debunk a family legend. I only wanted to find out how Jane Gates managed to carve out a decent life for herself and her family so soon after she had been a slave. I also wanted to find out whose blood flowed in the veins of her mulatto children.
Yeah,
that's it right there. Daddy?
Yes.
Do you remember when you first came here?
Yes.
When was it?
Memorial Day of 1921. You decorated the grave and all brought flowers.
So you were 8 years old?
Yes.
So whose grave did you decorate?
Right here, Jane's.
Just Jane's?
Yeah. My grandfather and grandmother were still living then, see.
Mm-hmm. I wish you'd said who her mother was and who her father was.
No.
It would have made our life a lot simpler, I'll tell you that.
When I was a kid, didn't discuss stuff like that with children like you did now.
Yeah, so you couldn't say, who's your daddy? The stories about Jane Gates and all my guest relatives have shown me how the former slaves made a way out of no way. How they persevered during the incredibly difficult transition from slavery to freedom. They laid the foundation upon which we have built our history and our culture. They are our roots. We are their branches. Almost all that we have learned about our newly freed ancestors comes from public documents after the Civil War. But what about our ancestors who lived their entire lives in slavery, from birth to the grave? We'll try to find them in the next stage of my journey into African American history.
Wow.
Log on to pbs.org to share your family history and start a PBS program club. You can also
take off my glasses, getting all comfy and stuff,
and see how the personal stories connect to the larger framework of African American history.
This is our second episode of
Come on around. How you doing, buddy? How you doing, beautiful?
Of finding out. This one I shared a little bit more. With Whoopi was on there, and Oprah still was on there. Ben Carson, who you do know, is on the actually the platform with Trump, where he is over HUD. So I said platform. My brain can't think right now, but you all know what I'm talking about. He is on the. He's on the seat. No, he is on the. On the panel. Y'all know what I'm talking about. He is actually one of his cabinet members. Okay, cabinet member. So just to hear his story, where he grew up and how did he, grew up, and you're going to learn more. So I was just intrigued with all that is going on, and it started for me wanting to know more about my history, that maybe I could help others to be inspired as well, because it's all about who you are and knowing who you are, and understanding that getting to a place where you know who you are, no matter how much we cover up with the beauty of life, the homes, the cars, the just the great jobs and the fabulous trips and just all the above. At the end of the day, first we are God's child, and that's we first to definitely connect and understand that, and then venture into the lineup of our forefathers, the ones that were enslaved, brought over to our country, to which we live, and all. So on yesterday, I came across some different recordings. One is known to be the oldest slave that lived in America, which he died at the age of 144, and it was so profound because just last week, a couple of weeks ago, I had not a couple of weeks ago, 2 days ago, before that, I had prayed, and I was like, I want to know more, because it has to be, we know so much of the storyline of them arriving here in America and working beyond being sold within the different areas. But what about them coming just in the midst of being in Africa getting on the ship? What are those stories? It wasn't passed on from them actually getting on the ship and being on the ship, traveling on the ship, and going forth. And I know there are movies that give you the visual and the view, the type of thing. But I wasn't led to see a movie and who that was tied in, how real that was of the movies that were tied in. I wanted to hear someone, or you see someone of that aspect. And yesterday, it just came out of basically nowhere. I found this amazing man who shared his story, and I was in awe. I cried throughout the segment that I shared. And for those who follow me on I'm Just Saying, it's a page where I share my opinion, my views, and I do reviews and all that great stuff. But in any way that you look at it, a lot of times when things are brought to the forefront, and knowing that I have built a foundation of my business over all these years, and knowing that most people may say I'm taking a chance because I'm stirring up stuff, but I'm not stirring up. So I feel led to be in this format because I wanted to understand where slavery came from. I wanted to understand where that notion even came about. How did it even came to someone's brains to want to enslave people, and not even thinking along the lines in the Bible, going back to Egypt, where the Egyptians held far as the ones in slavery for 400 years, the Israelites, and that was like, I never even connect the dots and to connect the thought about it. And then as I now was just researching, and after I typed it in, and it went from one area to the next, and I was like, where did the notion or whatever I put in there about slavery? It took me to Genesis, in Genesis, and I was like, wow. And so now it's like when I'm reading the Bible and looking at the Bible, I do know preachers and a lot of ministers and pastors and a lot of different ones, when they often pull a scripture out of the Bible, and they pretty much they share the scripture, and then they format it in the way of how we're living today, and in essence to have us not to sin against God's greatness. And then there are other ways, and so many ways of different ways, because there are preachers and ministers and pastors who are ones that are able to teach. They're teachers. Then you have some that they just got their own, sometimes their own style. But many years I sat in a church, and I heard the surface and never really was dug into the core. And I could truly say I feel much more educated, much more richer in who I am as of within the last month and a half. It's an amazing feeling to know. I always felt that, and knew I was someone in God. No one could never tell me that, but even to feel more richer. And it's just, when you hear of today, what I hope and I pray that I instill or either inspire you to start, questioning your elders that are in your family now, getting it written down in writing of who their family tree is lined. Because the young man you saw, Gates, he actually, this was and it was placed on many different channels, but they had people to research this. And a lot of times when we put in Ancestry.com, a lot of things are not there, So I'm fortunate. I would love to have someone in my camp. I came across a lady. I did a TV talk show in Atlanta last year, a year before, and she had started her own business of doing this. And I surely would like to get back in contact with her, because I'm not sure if this is what she's doing, but she started her own business actually looking, into your heritage and your roots and your lineage and all that great stuff. So I don't want no one to think that that you should feel that you are a nobody in a world so big. Don't let what you have define you. In a sense, if you understand what I'm saying with materialistic things. Because what God wants us to know is who we are in Him and who we are as people, where we came from. What was so shared earlier today, I was on, and I shared this about living in my hometown, which is Walter, South Carolina, all my life. I left there at the age of 18. We used to have this word that we said, and it was kamya. And kamya means come here. And I remember saying that word, and I remember our auntie pulling me aside or just correcting me and said, it's not kamya, it's come here. So, and even different things of not being able to pronounce words correctly. Like I say, I'm not perfect. I struggled with the STR words for a long time until I actually, it's like I noticed what I was saying, and then I studied the shit, to say it better. A lady was on YouTube the other day, and she was looking at the word AXES, like an axe to chop something down, versus ask, if asking someone a question. So where I came from, there were words, or we didn't end it with the complete pronunciation of a word, but we knew where each person was coming from. And there are times where I will get worked up, or many years have got upset about different things, and I will let you hold it. That's what you would call it. But then that's meaning that my true, like myself, like I don't care. And then they will hear the, hear the words, and you probably can hear it now that I'm like, oh my God, she didn't say that. What did she say? Oh my God, the Charleston came out of you, whatnot. So, and I was just talking today is that when I was in, also I didn't share this earlier, I was in Germany, and when a hurricane came through, the hurricane that came through Charleston, and so many hurricanes that came through you also. I'm trying to remember which one was it? Hurricane Hugo. And I'm in Charleston, in Germany, and the news came on, and immediately, without me even turning around, I knew exactly where it hit from their accent. So when you think about the slave ships coming in, and they're going to different ports, Charleston was one of them. And somehow along the way, my ancestors, because we formulate out of Savannah, that's my understanding, from Beaufort, South Carolina. But when you think of Charleston being that close, as you get to the inland, your dialect changes a great bit. But a lot of them that are in Charleston, and they call it Gullah, and they call it whatever, still have that accent. Well, my daughter said Geechee, and of course they put in Geechee. Then they even tied in and said, well, the more rice you eat, because I ate rice every single day that my mom cooked, that I was there the 18 years. Any meal that we had rice. So that's what they try to tie it back into that too. Say, well, your dialect is because of the rice eating, but in actuality, that was closer to where the slaves came in, and the accent was still there. But as people move up north of where and whatnot, then it began to change over time. I remember my older brother, he 2 years older than me, he went into the military, he came back, he didn't even sound like any of us. I was like, who is this guy? So they may say about me, that I haven't lived there since I was 18, that maybe my voice my dialect is a little different. But I'm going to be honest with you, we get home, honey, a couple of days in, hey, we all in. And it's not that you're trying to hide it or it's like you just basically, in a sense, you just fit it right into the area. But over the years, I can see and understand that the dialect did change, where it is much more, the pronunciation of the words is much more better. But this, that is tied into, a lot of people want to tie it into education. And if you can't talk the way how I talk, then you are nobody. That's another way that, far as was keeping one closer to the roots of slavery, because it came from no one or anyone knew how to read or write. And then a lot of them, they taught themselves, and a lot of them, you saw Oprah's ancestor were first starting the school, and it is just amazing story, amazing storyline. But the truth be told, you all, every last one of us do. We have an amazing storyline, but unfortunately, you just don't know about it. So the question to you today is, what you going to do about it? Are you going to learn more about you so you could actually pass it on? Because God could allow us to live another, not me, myself, maybe not you, and maybe so, who knows, but generations to come, another 400, 500, 600 years. Don't we owe them this, to give them the knowledge and the understanding of who we are and where we came from? We at least should do that. And it's not all about African Americans, it's Europeans, whites, and different ones from different nationality also. We owe our family members to come a knowledge of who we are and what we're about. We owe them that. So, the man that sticks out, and of course, I will do a little bit even more research because a lot of different documentary on him, and I want to see a movie on him. His name is Charlie Smith. He's the one that he said he was 144 years old when they did his interview, and I'm surprised that in 1979 he died in 1979. The interview was 3 years before. I'm surprised it wasn't a TV network came out and did that interview. And it could be. But what I found was a recorded one. And he shared his story from being in Africa. And as I, listening to it, you're welcome to listen to it yourself. He was in Africa, and he maybe, accordingly, we pictured them running behind, the Africans, and actually capturing them and tying them up and taking them, in the lines and on the ship. And maybe it was some at one point. But it possibly could be after Charlie. Sounds more likely it probably, well, I wouldn't say probably was. Because if Charlie, because slavery started in 1619. In 2 more years, you all, it'll be 2 more years to make 400 years. So it was way more before Charlie. And I shouldn't even say Charlie like I'm on his level, but Mr. Charlie Smith. So he was the eldest that we knew of, and 144 years old. But in 1979 is when he died. And he told a story of coming on the ship, but he wanted to go to the ship. So it could have been where they may, found other ways to get around them, or either they came on enticing them, showing them something new and different. But his story was he actually knew about the ship, and he told his mom he wanted to go to, which he said, the actual area where the ships were. And he didn't say shipyard, but he said the ship port, or something along those lines. And he said, he mentioned about like what we call pancakes. They evidently had those or was serving those, or you could probably smell it. And so he was enticed, and they actually said, well, come on the ship. Let us show you all. And they're the ones who went on the ship. They kept taking them in different areas until they got them down in the main floor area. So I'm assuming at this time there was no, of course, windows or anything. You couldn't see. It was dark, but they had him down. At this point, he didn't say whether he was shackled or not. But he said he recalled after a period of time, the ship started moving. And as the ship started moving, he thought to himself that it was just going to, go up a little bit more up into within Africa. Because at this point it's in Liberia, which is West Africa. So as he didn't say any more between, because you imagine someone at the age of 144. So when he told a story, he was like 141 years old. I got my math right? Yeah. And there were times he was repeating himself here or there, but for the most part, he sounds, like he had everything, like, but it could tell like early stages of dementia, whatever. You could tell that a little bit that was there, because he kept repeating himself to a certain degree, but not often throughout the taping, and you can hear it. It's amazing. And he said when he knew anything, that when the ship stopped, of course, and it took a while, he didn't give any details between, and maybe he gave it in another interview, but in this interview he didn't, that I could recall, that it ended up in New Orleans. slave owners was buying different ones, bidding, but his slave owner, which we would say a slave owner, but it happened to be, and he make it plain and simple. He said, I wasn't bought. My slave owner did not buy me. He bid it on me, but it was like if they had something was connected. But on the ship, evidently, it was something special about him, because the way he made it appear that a lot of the other Africans were down with him. They wanted to throw him over the ship. So evidently, someone on the ship, an authority, saw something in him and lining up with God. Because a family that got him in America, he said he ended up living like they were brothers and sisters. It wasn't like the storyline that we always knew of working in the fields. He not being a cowboy on this actually ranch in Galveston, Texas. That's the story. That's what it states. He's in Wikipedia. You can look it up. I was like, wow. Because as we do know, every story is not going to be the same. There's no such thing. No one can live everybody else's life and vice versa. So that was a story that touched me, and I definitely want to dig a little bit more further with it. But then I came across another one named, his name was Fountain Huge. Oh, okay. All right, thank you, Regina. And then, so Fountain Huge, he actually was born into slavery in America, in Charlottesville, North Carolina. He when he did an interview, he was 101 years old, and he shared the story. So, and then it was two other women that had also was interviewed also. And one, they interviewed her. She made sense somewhat throughout, and then there were times where, her daughter, one, will try to get her to speak. So at this point, I can't remember what age she was. But the reason why it's so important to know and understand, because it actually will, take you into places, and even lining up with the Bible, what's going to come in the end time, all of that actually matters. But I'm touched, I'm moved, I'm motivated, I'm excited, I'm proud, I am all the above. But in all of this, why I sit on Facebook and share this, there's nothing to hide. I shouldn't go into a secret group to have this conversation because I'm black and the person I might offend might be white, or it might be another nationality. This is called real time here, real deal time. It was real deal time in the Bible. It's real deal time here. It's not to offend anybody. It's to enlighten people to know. I see a lot of stuff coming through your messages. If you're going to put it through messages, put it out in a post. Because we, as ones who are descendants of Africa, we need to know our roots. We need to know that. Because it's just that important. And maybe what I'm doing may inspire you. Some may not be, they just see it totally different. Forget the past. I'm moving forward. But everything we got and live and breathe and everything is made of history. And we have to own up to it. But I would love to sit down one day when I have my grands, and even with my girls, and if I live, God spare my life to live and be able to tell my great grands the story of my life, Because it may not mean nothing to you now, and you may not even see it. And I'm not boasting or bragging. But every magazine I have, my great-great-great-grands will be able to see it. Everybody who were ever featured in my magazine, their family will be able to see it. Every post I make on Facebook, every post you make on Facebook, your family will be able to see it. We are making history as we speak. So why not impact it with a mighty way to make a difference? So that's all I have, everyone. Regina just put something on. She said amazing. Amazon, I always want to say amazing. Amazon, you can get the book. It's called Miseducation of the Negro, okay? And from the Babylon to Timbuktu. And I used to hear the saying about, they used to make a little, saying about, oh, you from Timbuktu? Or, girl, I will knock you back to Timbuktu, or something like that. It used to be a little saying. And not even knowing you all. Wow. All this is tied in. And so, the incident that happened in Niger with the 4 soldiers, it's just opened up a whole world. It's like, to me, but before then, I just wanted to understand where did slavery come from and who came up with that notion and why. And now I know. So more to come, everyone. Next week we'll have the 3rd addition to this, and I will probably put out things, throughout the week from here or there, talking about your heritage, knowing who you are, your roots, getting to, just be able to line it up. And I just strongly suggest anyone with elders in their family, and they may be in their 80s or 90s, and some may be in their hundreds right now. Please, if you haven't, talk to them. Please, please make a way. Talk to them. Please, please, please. That's where the richness comes from. You knowing. All right, everyone. Well, have a great day. God bless you all. And I had about, probably 15 people on my other segment, but it got disconnected. So I do apologize. Hey, Linda Fripp. Kiss, kiss. I saw a cute picture of I just clicking on it on Instagram. I just liked it not too long ago. Beautiful picture of Asia. Beautiful, beautiful. Hey, Paul. Hey, Celia. Hi. Look again. How you doing? Hey, Tressie. Good to see you. Hey, Jesse. Okay, and Regina, thank you so much for enlightening and providing that information too. And I just definitely, I want to get all those books, and then especially if I can see it online, that will be a great help. But on this journey and on this quest, you are welcome to follow and go with me. And it, like I said, it at the end and all, it will open up your thoughts and wants and desires to want to know more about your bloodline. Not because you could be rich and money's out there waiting on you, but because that is what, to me, is the richest thing you can have to know and to be, because you can be a family, with family, around family, and don't even know it. And a thought comes to mind. It don't have nothing to me. I'm not on here to stir up, like, when it comes down to bashing for what happened from, with slavery, what happened on the ship, what happened when they got here, what happened in one, would signify or state that or make a note because I have arrived. That's what one would say. I got my fancy cars. I got my house. I got my purses. Got my jewelry. I have arrived. But you don't even know who you are. But mainly, do you know who you are in God? That's all I have for this week, y'all. Take care. God bless.